The dust from the cattle drive had barely settled when Sarah Montgomery noticed ranch foreman Dutch Keller watching her with eyes that made her skin crawl, and she knew her father's death 3 months prior had left her vulnerable in ways she had never imagined possible in the harsh Wyoming territory of 1882. Sarah had inherited the small homestead on the edge of the massive Rocking W Ranch when her father succumbed to pneumonia that bitter winter. At 22 years old, she found herself alone with a modest herd of cattle, a sturdy cabin, and land that Dutch Keller had been eyeing for years. Her father had always stood firm against Dutch's offers to buy them out, but now there was no one standing between her and the foreman's ambitions except her own stubborn will. The Rocking W Ranch sprawled across thousands of acres of Wyoming grassland, owned by an aging cattle baron named William Westbrook, who spent most of his time back east tending to his other business interests. Dutch Keller ran the operation with an iron fist, commanding over 30 ranch hands and wielding power like a small-town tyrant. Sarah's property sat like an island in the middle of Rocking W land, a constant irritation to Dutch, who wanted complete control of the grazing rights and water access her creek provided. She had been mending a fence line on a sweltering July afternoon when Dutch rode up with 2 of his men. Sarah straightened from her work, wiping sweat from her brow and feeling the weight of her father's old revolver at her hip. She had started wearing it everywhere since Dutch's visits became more frequent and his intentions more transparent. "Miss Montgomery," Dutch called out, dismounting with the casual arrogance of a man who believed the world owed him whatever he desired. He was a big man, thick through the shoulders, with a face weathered by sun and hard living. At 43, he had the kind of rough handsomeness that some women might find appealing, but Sarah saw only calculation in his pale blue eyes. Working too hard for a lady on her own. This is man's work. "I managed just fine," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. She kept the fence post between them, her hand drifting closer to her revolver. Dutch smiled, but it never reached his eyes. "Your daddy was a stubborn man, Sarah. Got him nowhere in the end. You don't have to follow that same path." He stepped closer, and Sarah caught the scent of whiskey on his breath despite the early hour. "I am offering you a good price for this land. More than fair." "I have told you before, this land is not for sale," Sarah said firmly. "My father built this place. I intend to keep it." The smile faded from Dutch's face, replaced by something harder and more dangerous. "You think you can make it out here alone? Winter is coming again. Stock needs tending. Fences need mending. This is no life for a woman without a man to provide for her." "Then I will find my own way," Sarah shot back, "but I will not be bullied into selling my birthright." Dutch's jaw clenched, and he took another step forward. His men remained mounted but alert, watching the exchange with interest. "You are making this harder than it needs to be, girl. I am trying to be reasonable here, but my patience has limits." "Your patience is not my concern," Sarah said, her hand now resting openly on the grip of her revolver. "I will ask you to leave my property." For a moment, something ugly flickered across Dutch's face, but then he forced another smile and tipped his hat. "We will talk again when you have had time to reconsider. Woman alone out here needs to think practical." He mounted his horse with easy grace despite his size. Real practical. Sarah watched them ride away, her heart hammering in her chest. She knew this was far from over. Dutch Keller was not a man who accepted refusal gracefully, and she had just given him another one. As the riders disappeared over the ridge, Sarah returned to her fence, mending with shaking hands, wondering how long she could hold out against the pressure Dutch could bring to bear. That evening, Sarah drove her small wagon into Clearwater, the nearest town, to pick up supplies. The settlement was typical of Wyoming territory in those days, a single main street lined with false-fronted buildings that housed a general store, saloon, hotel, livery stable, and a handful of other businesses. The town existed primarily to serve the ranching community, and since the Rocking W was by far the largest operation in the area, Dutch Keller's influence extended into every corner of Clearwater's social and economic life. Sarah felt eyes on her as she tied up her wagon outside Henderson's general store. She had grown accustomed to the stares and whispers since her father's death. Some people pitied her. Others gossiped about how long she would last before Dutch forced her out or worse. A few admired her determination but kept their distance, unwilling to cross the powerful Foreman. Inside the store, Mrs. Henderson greeted her with genuine warmth. The older woman had been friends with Sarah's mother before she died, bringing Sarah into the world. "Sarah, dear, how are you managing?" "Well enough," Sarah replied, handing over her list. "I need these supplies when you have a chance to gather them." Mrs. Henderson glanced at the list and frowned. "Sarah, I hate to mention this, but your account is getting rather high. My husband is worried about extending more credit." Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I will have money after I sell my cattle in the fall. You know I'm good for it." "I know, dear, but—" Mrs. Henderson lowered her voice and leaned closer. "Dutch Keller was in here yesterday. He made some comments about how risky it is to do business with someone who might not be around much longer. My husband is afraid of crossing him." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Dutch was not just pressuring her directly. He was cutting off her access to credit and supplies, trying to strangle her operation slowly. "I see," she said quietly. "What if I pay cash for today's supplies? I have a little set aside." Mrs. Henderson's expression softened with relief and sympathy. "That would help, dear. I am sorry. If it were up to me alone." "I understand," Sarah said, though anger burned in her chest. She knew the Hendersons had their own livelihood to protect. Dutch could make life very difficult for anyone who defied him. Sarah was loading her supplies into the wagon when she noticed a group of Rocking W ranch hands lounging outside the saloon, watching her with undisguised interest. Among them was Jake Morrison, one of Dutch's most loyal men, a cruel-eyed cowboy who seemed to take pleasure in intimidation. He said something to his companions that Sarah could not hear, but their laughter made her skin prickle with unease. She finished loading quickly and climbed onto the wagon seat, taking up the reins. As she guided her team down the street, Jake Morrison stepped out into her path, forcing her to pull up short. "Afternoon, Miss Montgomery," he drawled, his hand resting on his gun belt. "Dutch mentioned you might be having some difficulties. Shame to see a pretty woman struggling so." "Excuse me," Sarah said coldly. "I need to pass." Jake made no move to step aside. Dutch is a patient man, but even patience runs out. You might want to think about being more friendly to his offers. Things could get unpleasant otherwise. Sarah felt fear coil in her stomach, but she refused to let it show. "Move aside or I will drive through you." Jake laughed, but something in her eyes must have convinced him she meant it. He stepped aside with exaggerated courtesy, sweeping off his hat in a mocking bow. "Yes, ma'am, but you remember what I said. Winter comes early in Wyoming." Sarah snapped the reins and drove past him, refusing to look back, though she felt their eyes boring into her back the entire way down the street. Her hands trembled on the reins as Clearwater disappeared behind her. She was in real trouble now, and she knew it. Dutch was tightening the noose, and she had no one to turn to for help. The sun was setting by the time Sarah reached her property, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if she had not been so consumed with worry. She was unhitching her team when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Her hand went instinctively to her revolver as a single rider came over the rise. The man who rode into her yard was not one of Dutch's men. Sarah had seen him around Clearwater a few times over the past month, a tall cowboy with dark hair and quiet eyes who seemed to keep to himself. He sat his horse with the easy grace of someone who had spent most of his life in the saddle, and even in the fading light, Sarah could see the strength in his lean frame. "Evening, ma'am," he called out, stopping a respectful distance away and keeping his hands visible. "I do not mean to startle you. My name is Cole Brennan. I'm looking for work, and I heard you might need a hand." Sarah studied him warily. "Who told you that?" "Mrs. Henderson at the general store," Cole replied. "I was in there earlier buying supplies. She mentioned you were running your place alone and could use some help." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "She seemed concerned about you." "I cannot afford to hire anyone," Sarah said bluntly. There was no point in pretending otherwise. Cole nodded, as if he had expected that answer. I would work for room and board until you sell your cattle in the fall. Then you could pay me whatever you think is fair." Sarah frowned. "Why would you do that? You could find paying work at any of the ranches around here." Something flickered in Cole's eyes, an emotion Sarah could not quite read. "Let us just say I do not particularly care to work for Dutch Keller, and he seems to have most of the other operations around here under his thumb. Your place is the only one independent of his influence." "That independence may not last much longer," Sarah said quietly. "A Dutch wants my land. He is making life very difficult for me." "I noticed," Cole said. "I saw what happened in town today. Jake Morrison is a bully and a coward." He met her eyes directly. "I am not afraid of Dutch Keller or his men, Miss Montgomery, and I know cattle and horses. I can help you hold this place together." Sarah wanted to refuse. Accepting help from a stranger seemed foolish, possibly even dangerous. But she was exhausted from trying to manage everything alone, and the supplies she had just purchased had taken nearly the last of her cash reserves. If she did not get her cattle to market in good condition, she would lose everything anyway. "Why do you really want to work here?" she asked, searching his face for any sign of deception. "What are you not telling me?" Cole was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was honest in a way that made Sarah believe him despite her caution. "I spent 5 years working for a ranch foreman who treated his men like property and his power like a weapon. When I finally stood up to him, he made sure I could not find decent work anywhere in Montana territory. I drifted down here hoping for a fresh start." He shifted in his saddle. "I saw what Dutch did to you in town, and I saw how you handled it. Reminded me of my own sister back in Montana trying to hold on to her husband's farm after he died. I could not help her because I was too far away and too broke to make a difference. Maybe I can help you instead." The raw honesty in his words struck something deep in Sarah's chest. She made her decision based more on instinct than logic. "All right, Mr. Brennan, you can stay in the bunkhouse. I will provide meals and $20 a month until the cattle sale. If you are still here after that, we can discuss proper wages." Relief washed over Cole's face. "Thank you, ma'am. You will not regret this." "Call me Sarah," she said, surprising herself. "If we are going to be working together, we might as well use first names." Cole smiled for the first time, and Sarah felt something warm unfurl in her chest at the sight. "Then you should call me Cole." Over the following weeks, Sarah discovered that Cole Brennan was as good as his word. He worked from dawn until dusk without complaint, mending fences, tending cattle, fixing the sagging barn roof, and tackling a dozen other tasks that Sarah had been struggling to manage alone. He was quiet, but not unfriendly, and Sarah found herself looking forward to their evening meals when they would sit on the porch and talk about the day's work. Cole had a dry sense of humor that surprised her, and an easy manner that gradually wore down her defensive walls. He told her stories about his childhood in Texas before his family moved to Montana, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about the time he and his brother had accidentally let a prize bull loose in the town's Independence Day celebration. Sarah found herself laughing more than she had since her father died, and sometimes she caught Cole watching her with an expression that made her heart beat faster. For his part, Cole found himself drawn to Sarah in ways he had not anticipated. She was beautiful, with rich brown hair that caught the sunlight and green eyes that could flash with anger or soften with kindness. But it was her strength that truly captivated him. The determined set of her jaw when facing difficulty, the gentle way she handled the animals, the fierce independence that made her refuse to give up even when everything seemed stacked against her. He had not lied about his reasons for offering to work for her, but he had not told her the whole truth either. He had seen the way Dutch Keller looked at her in town that day, had recognized the predatory calculation in the foreman's eyes. Something protective had risen up in Cole, an instinct that went beyond helping a stranger. He had known even then that Sarah Montgomery was going to become important to him. The trouble came on a Tuesday morning in early August. Sarah and Cole were working together to move a small group of cattle to better grazing when they spotted riders approaching. Even from a distance, Sarah recognized Dutch Keller's big roan horse. "Let me handle this," Cole said quietly, moving his horse between Sarah and the approaching riders. Dutch rode up with 4 men this time, his expression thunderous. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded, glaring at Cole. "Name is Cole Brennan. I work for Miss Montgomery." Dutch's eyes narrowed. "I have not seen you around here before." "I have been around long enough," Cole replied evenly. "Is there something we can help you with?" "I am here to talk to Sarah," Dutch said, trying to look around Cole. "This does not concern you, Drifter." Cole did not budge. "Anything concerning this ranch concerns me. State your business or move along." Sarah saw the anger building in Dutch's face and urged her horse forward before the situation could escalate. "It is all right, Cole. I can speak to Mr. Keller." She fixed Dutch with a steady gaze, "Though I cannot imagine we have anything new to discuss." Dutch's attention snapped to her, and Sarah saw something ugly simmering beneath his forced civility. "I am here with a final offer for your land, Sarah. $5,000 cash money. That is more than generous for a property this size." "I have told you repeatedly my land is not for sale," Sarah said firmly. "You are being unreasonable," Dutch snapped, his veneer of politeness cracking. "You cannot possibly run this operation alone, and now you have hired some drifter to help you?" He laughed harshly. "How are you even paying him? Or maybe that is not the kind of payment you're making." The crude implication hung in the air like a slap. Sarah felt her face burn with humiliation and rage. Before she could respond, Cole moved his horse forward, his body tense with barely controlled anger. "You will apologize for that?" Cole said, his voice low and dangerous. Dutch smirked. "Or what, Drifter? You think you can take on all of us?" "I think you are a coward who hides behind his men and insults women because it makes him feel powerful," Cole said. "But I'm happy to test my theory if you want to step down from that horse." For a moment, Sarah thought Dutch might actually accept the challenge. His face flushed dark red and his hand twitched toward his gun. But then he seemed to remember himself and forced a laugh. "I am not wasting my time on hired help. Sarah, you have 1 week to reconsider my offer. After that, things are going to get very difficult for you. Your cattle might start wandering off. Your fences might get cut. Accidents happen on isolated ranches." "Are you threatening me?" Sarah demanded. "I am stating facts," Dutch replied coldly. 1 week, Sarah. Think about it carefully." He wheeled his horse around and rode off, his men following. Sarah and Cole watched them disappear over the ridge. When they were gone, Sarah released a shaky breath. "Thank you for standing up for me, but you should not have provoked him. Dutch is dangerous when his pride is wounded." "He is dangerous regardless, Moore," Cole said, his jaw tight with anger, "and I will not stand by while he disrespects you." Something in his tone made Sarah look at him more closely. The protective fury in his eyes was not just about defending someone weaker against a bully. There was something more personal in it, something that made her pulse quicken. "Cole," she said softly, "you barely know me. Why are you putting yourself at risk for my sake?" Cole met her eyes, and in that moment Sarah saw the truth written plainly across his face. "Maybe I want to know you better," he said quietly. "Maybe I have wanted that since the first time I saw you in town standing up to those men with your head held high and fire in your eyes." He looked away, suddenly self-conscious. "I know I have got no right to feel that way. I am just a hired hand with nothing to my name, but that does not change how I feel." Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. No man had ever spoken to her with such honest emotion, without trying to possess or control her. "Cole, She did not know what to say, how to put into words the feelings that had been growing inside her over the past weeks. "You do not have to say anything," Cole said quickly. "I just wanted you to know where I stand. Whatever happens with Dutch Keller, I'm not walking away. I am here for as long as you will have me." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. For the first time since her father's death, she did not feel alone. "I am glad you are here," she said softly, "more glad than I can properly express." Cole smiled, and the warmth in his eyes made Sarah feel like the sun had come out after a long winter. "Then that is enough for now." The week passed with agonizing slowness. Dutch did not return, but his presence hung over the ranch like a storm cloud. Sarah and Cole worked side by side, preparing for trouble they both knew was coming. They moved the cattle closer to the house, where they could watch them more easily. Cole spent an evening cleaning and oiling both his guns and Sarah's. They took turns standing watch at night, though Sarah often woke to find Cole still on guard when he should have been sleeping. The closeness of those days, the shared purpose and growing trust, deepened the connection between them. Sarah found herself noticing small things about Cole, the way he was gentle with the horses, how he always made sure she ate enough at meals, the sound of his voice when he sang quietly to himself while working. Cole, in turn, memorized everything about Sarah, her laugh, the determined set of her shoulders when she faced a challenge, the way she bit her lower lip when concentrating, the kindness in her eyes when she thought no one was watching. They were dancing around their feelings, neither quite ready to name what was growing between them, but both aware that something profound was shifting in their lives. The explosion came on the 8th day after Dutch's ultimatum, though not in the way either of them expected. Sarah had ridden into Clearwater alone that morning despite Cole's objections. She needed to check on a shipment at the general store and refused to hide on her own property. Cole stayed behind to repair a water pump that had broken the night before, but his unease followed Sarah the entire ride into town. Clearwater was busier than usual, with ranch hands from several outfits taking their leisure on a hot Saturday afternoon. Sarah completed her business at the general store quickly, eager to get home. She was loading her purchases into the wagon when Dutch Keller appeared beside her, moving so quietly that she gasped in surprise. "Time is up, Sarah," Dutch said without preamble. His breath reeked of whiskey, and his eyes had the glassy sheen of someone who had been drinking steadily. "I have been more than patient with you. Too patient. It ends today." "I have nothing to say to you," Sarah replied, trying to step around him. Dutch grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in painfully. "You're going to come with me to the land office right now," Dutch said, his voice low and threatening. "You're going to sign those papers transferring your property to me, and you are going to do it with a smile. Otherwise, your hired man is going to have a very unfortunate accident. Already got men riding out to your place right now." Fear shot through Sarah like ice water. "You would not dare." "Try me," Dutch snarled. He started pulling her toward the land office, his grip on her arm like iron. Sarah tried to pull away, but Dutch was far stronger. She opened her mouth to scream, but Dutch's other hand clamped over it. "Do not make a scene, or Cole Brennan is a dead man. Nod if you understand." Tears of rage and fear burned in Sarah's eyes, but she nodded. Dutch removed his hand from her mouth, but kept his grip on her arm as he marched her down the boardwalk toward the land office. People noticed, but no one intervened. Dutch Keller's power in Clearwater was absolute, and no one wanted to cross him. They were halfway to the land office when a voice rang out across the street, clear and commanding. "Let her go, Keller." Dutch and Sarah both turned. Cole Brennan stood in the middle of the dusty street. His stance relaxed, but his eyes hard as flint. He must have finished the pump repair early and followed Sarah into town, arriving just in time to see Dutch grab her. "This does not concern you, Drifter," Dutch called back, but his hand loosened slightly on Sarah's arm. "She answers to me," Cole said, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence that had fallen over the street. "And I am telling you to let her go. Right now." Dutch laughed, but there was an edge of uncertainty in it. "You're out of your mind. You think you can take me?" "Let her go and find out," Cole said simply. For a moment, Dutch hesitated. Then his pride won out over his caution. He shoved Sarah away hard enough that she stumbled and fell to her knees on the boardwalk. "Fine. You want to die for this woman, that is your choice." Dutch stepped into the street, his hand hovering over his gun. The crowd scattered, people ducking into buildings or pressing against walls to get out of the line of fire. Sarah pulled herself up, her heart in her throat. "Cole, no, he will kill you." But Cole was not looking at her. His entire focus was on Dutch, And there was something in his bearing that made Sarah suddenly realize this was not the first time Cole had faced down a dangerous man. "Whenever you're ready," Cole said calmly. Dutch's face twisted with rage. His hand dropped toward his gun. He was fast, faster than Sarah would have expected, but Cole was faster. The shot rang out before Dutch's gun even cleared leather. Dutch stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder, his gun falling into the dust. But Cole was already moving forward, his gun disappearing back into its holster. Before Dutch could recover, Cole's fist connected with his jaw in a devastating punch that Sarah heard crack from 20 feet away. Dutch went down like a felled tree and did not move. Cole stood over the fallen foreman, his chest heaving with emotion that went beyond the physical exertion. "She answers to me," he repeated, his voice low, but carrying clearly to everyone watching. "And if anyone has a problem with that, they can take it up with me the same way." No one moved. No one spoke. Then slowly Cole turned and walked to where Sarah still knelt on the boardwalk. He reached down and gently helped her to her feet, his hands infinitely careful despite the violence they had just unleashed. "Are you hurt?" he asked softly, his eyes searching her face. Sarah shook her head, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Cole's hands moved to her arm where Dutch had grabbed her, his jaw tightening as he saw the marks already forming. "I should have killed him," Cole said quietly. "No," Sarah managed to whisper. "No more violence. You did enough." Someone called for the doctor and the sheriff. The crowd began to buzz with conversation, the spell of silence broken. Cole ignored all of it, his attention solely on Sarah. "We need to get you home," he said. "Dutch said he had men heading to your place. We need to get there first." Sarah nodded, and Cole helped her to her wagon. As they prepared to leave, Sheriff Tom Bradley appeared, a weathered man in his 50s who had held his position through careful neutrality in local disputes. "Cole Brennan," the sheriff said carefully, "I am going to need a statement about what happened here." "He grabbed Miss Montgomery and threatened her," Cole said flatly. "He threatened me. I defended myself and her. That is the entire story." "That is exactly how it happened, Sheriff," a voice called out. Sarah turned to see Mrs. Henderson standing in front of her store, her arms crossed. "Dutch Keller grabbed that poor girl and tried to force her down the street. Mr. Brennan here stopped him from doing something terrible?" Other voices chimed in, corroborating the story. The sheriff sighed and nodded. "All right then. Dutch brought this on himself. But you better watch your back, Brennan. Dutch Keller does not forget, and he has got a lot of men loyal to him." "I am counting on it," Cole said grimly. They rode hard back to the ranch, taking turns driving the wagon and riding Cole's horse that he had tied behind. When they arrived, they found the place undisturbed. Either Dutch had been bluffing about sending men, or those men had not arrived yet. Cole immediately began preparing for a possible attack, positioning rifles at strategic points around the property and ensuring all the ammunition was ready. But the attack never came. As they learned later from Mrs. Henderson, who rode out the next day, the confrontation in town had shifted something fundamental in Clearwater's power structure. Dutch Keller had ruled through intimidation and the implicit threat of violence, but Cole had called his bluff and beaten him publicly. Dutch's jaw was broken in 2 places, and he would not be doing much talking or fighting for months. More importantly, word had spread quickly to Mr. Westbrook back east about his foreman's behavior and the resulting gunfight. William Westbrook, it turned out, was a shrewd businessman who cared more about his reputation than about Dutch Keller's ambitions. Having his foreman shot while trying to force a young woman to sign away her property was exactly the kind of scandal Westbrook wanted to avoid. Within 2 weeks, Dutch was fired and ordered to leave the territory. The Rocking W got a new foreman, a fair-minded man named Tom Douglas, who rode out to Sarah's place personally to apologize for Dutch's behavior and assure her that the Rocking W had no designs on her property. Through all of this upheaval, Sarah and Cole grew closer. The crisis had burned away the careful politeness between them, leaving something raw and honest in its place. They stopped pretending that Cole was just a hired hand. They stopped dancing around their feelings. It happened one evening in early September when the heat of summer was finally breaking and the first cool winds of autumn swept down from the mountains. They were sitting on the porch after a long day of work, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Sarah had been quiet all day, wrestling with thoughts and feelings she could no longer contain. "Cole," she said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence, "when you said I answered to you in town that day, what did you mean?" Cole turned to look at her, his expression serious. "I meant that no one had the right to force your hand. Not Dutch, not anyone. I meant that if anyone wanted to hurt you, they would have to go through me first." He paused, seeming to gather his courage. "But I also meant that I was claiming you if you would have me. I know I have got no right. I am nobody, Sarah. I have got nothing to offer you except my 2 hands and my promise to work hard and treat you right. But I love you. I think I have loved you since the day I rode into your yard and saw the determination in your eyes." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "You love me?" "With everything I am," Cole said simply. "I know it is too soon. I know I should wait longer before saying something like that, but after what happened with Dutch, I realize life is too short and too uncertain to leave important things unsaid. I love you, Sarah Montgomery. I want to help you build this ranch into something great. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to give you children and grow old with you and love you until my last breath." He reached out and took her hand, his thumbs stroking gently over her knuckles. "But only if that is what you want too. I will never force your hand, Sarah. I will never be like Dutch Keller. You are free to tell me no, and I will stay on as your hired hand and never mention this again." Tears streamed down Sarah's face, but she was smiling. "Cole Brennan, you are not nobody. You are the man who stood up for me when no one else would. You are the man who saw me as a partner, not a possession. You are the man I have fallen in love with. Even though I tried not to because I was afraid of being hurt or controlled again." She squeezed his hand. "Yes, yes to all of it. Yes to building this ranch together. Yes to children and growing old and loving each other. Yes to everything." Cole pulled her into his arms and Sarah went willingly, burying her face against his chest as his arms wrapped around her strong and sure. "I will make you happy," Cole whispered against her hair. "I swear it, Sarah. I will work every day of my life to make you happy." Sarah tilted her face up to his, and Cole kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart ache in the best possible way. It was not their first kiss, but it felt like a beginning, the start of something beautiful and enduring that would carry them through whatever challenges life might bring. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony in Clearwater, with Mrs. Henderson and her husband standing as witnesses and most of the town turning out to celebrate. It was a marked contrast to the fear that had gripped the community under Dutch Keller's influence. People seemed relieved to have something joyful to celebrate, and the wedding turned into an impromptu festival with music and dancing that lasted well into the night. Sarah wore a simple cream-colored dress that Mrs. Henderson had helped her alter from one of her mother's old gowns. Cole wore a new suit that he had purchased with his first month's wages, looking almost uncomfortable in the formal clothing until Sarah whispered that she thought he looked handsome, and his resulting smile made the expense worthwhile. When Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, and Cole kissed his bride in front of the whole town, Sarah felt a happiness so complete that it almost frightened her with its intensity. Their wedding night was spent in the small cabin that was now truly their home, and Sarah discovered that the tenderness Cole had always shown her extended into every aspect of their relationship. He was patient and gentle, making her first time an experience of love rather than mere physical coupling. Afterward, lying in his arms, with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Sarah thanked God for bringing this man into her life. The years that followed were not without challenges, but Sarah and Cole faced them together as true partners. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Cole proved to have a gift for breeding horses, and they gradually shifted their focus from cattle to raising quality stock that became sought after throughout the territory. Sarah's head for numbers and organization complemented Cole's practical skills perfectly, and together they built something far more successful than either could have managed alone. Their first child arrived in the spring of 1884, a healthy baby boy they named Daniel after Sarah's father. Cole was present for the birth, holding Sarah's hand through the long labor and weeping openly when he first held his son. Sarah had never loved him more than in that moment, seeing the fierce tenderness in his eyes as he cradled the tiny infant. "He is perfect," Cole whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "You are perfect. Thank you for giving me this, Sarah. Thank you for giving me a family." Daniel was followed 2 years later by twin daughters, Emma and Grace, who kept their parents constantly busy and filled the house with laughter. Cole proved to be a devoted father, patient with the children, and always willing to play or read stories even after long days of hard work. Sarah would often find him in the evenings with all 3 children clustered around him, listening raptly to his stories about Texas or his adventures on the trail. As Wyoming territory moved towards statehood, Sarah and Cole became respected members of their community. They hired several hands to help with the growing horse operation, treating their employees with fairness and respect that earned fierce loyalty. When drought hit the region in 1889, they shared their water resources with neighbors who were struggling, building goodwill that paid dividends in the years to come. Sarah never forgot the day Dutch Keller tried to force her hand, but the memory lost its power to frighten her over time. She had faced down that threat and won, not because she stood alone, but because she found a partner who saw her as an equal. Cole never tried to control her or diminish her. When they disagreed, which happened occasionally in any marriage, they talked it through as partners until they found solutions that worked for both of them. By 1891, when Wyoming achieved statehood, the Brennan Ranch was one of the most successful horse operations in the region. They had expanded their property, purchasing additional land from neighbors who were ready to retire, until their holdings rivaled even the rocking W. They built a larger house to accommodate their growing family, a beautiful 2-story home with a wide porch where Sarah and Cole still sat together in the evenings, watching the sunset and counting their blessings. One evening in the fall of 1891, they sat together on that porch while their children played in the yard under the watchful eye of their housekeeper. 9 years had passed since that fateful day in Clearwater when Cole had faced down Dutch Keller. Sarah was 31 now, and Cole was 34, both of them weathered by sun and hard work, but still deeply in love. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been?" Sarah asked, leaning against Cole's shoulder. "If you had not ridden into my yard that day?" Cole wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "I think about it sometimes. I think about how lost I was before I found you, how empty my life felt." He kissed the top of her head. "But mostly I just feel grateful. Grateful that I had the courage to ask for work that day. Grateful that you took a chance on a stranger. Grateful for every single day I have gotten to spend as your husband." Sarah tilted her face up to kiss him, still feeling that flutter in her chest that she had felt the first time. "I love you, Cole Brennan, more now than even on the day we married." "I love you too," Cole murmured against her lips, "more than I can ever properly express." They sat together as the sun set, their children's laughter drifting on the evening breeze, the land they had built together stretching out before them. Sarah thought about the frightened, desperate young woman she had been 9 years ago, facing down Dutch Keller alone and certain she would lose everything. She thought about the quiet cowboy who had offered to work for nothing because he saw something worth protecting. Cole had broken Dutch Keller's jaw and claimed her in front of the whole town, but what he had really done was set her free. Free from fear, free from loneliness, free from the belief that she had to face the world's challenges alone. In declaring that she answered to him, Cole had actually been saying that he answered to her too, that they would face the world together as equals and partners. That partnership had given them everything: a thriving ranch, 3 beautiful children, a place in their community, and a love that deepened with every passing year. Sarah could not imagine a better life, could not imagine a better man to share it with. More children came in the following years. A son named Matthew in 1893 and another daughter, Rose, in 1895. Their house was always full of noise and activity, and both Sarah and Cole loved it that way. They had both known loneliness before they found each other, and they never took for granted the blessing of a large, loving family. As the children grew, Cole taught all of them to ride and work with horses, regardless of gender. Sarah taught them to read and do figures, and also how to shoot and handle themselves in difficult situations. The Brennan children grew up strong and confident, knowing they were loved unconditionally and that both their parents saw them as capable individuals. Daniel, the eldest, showed an early gift for understanding horses that rivaled his father's. By the time he was 16, he was helping Cole break and train the yearlings, and buyers throughout the state specifically requested horses that Daniel Brennan had worked with. Emma and Grace, the twins, were inseparable and had their mother's head for business. They kept the ranch accounts and managed the correspondence with buyers, turning what had been a disorganized system into a model of efficiency. Matthew inherited his father's quiet strength and his mother's determination, while Rose, the baby, had a gift for gentling even the most difficult horses with her patience and soft voice. The years rolled by in a parade of seasons, each bringing its own challenges and rewards. There were hard winters and dry summers, sick animals and broken equipment, the normal trials of ranching life. But there were also spring mornings when the meadows were carpeted with wildflowers, summer evenings filled with music and laughter, fall roundups when the whole family worked together, and winter nights around the fire with everyone safe and warm and together. Through it all, Sarah and Cole's love remained the foundation everything else was built upon. They still made time for each other, still sat together on the porch in the evenings, still looked at each other with eyes that held both the passion of young love and the deeper contentment of true partnership. In 1902, when Sarah was 42 and Cole was 45, they celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary with a large party that brought together friends and neighbors from across the state. Their oldest son, Daniel, was 18 now and courting a nice girl from a neighboring ranch. The twins were 16 and had already received several marriage proposals, though they insisted they were in no hurry to leave home. Matthew, at 9, was all energy and mischief, while 7-year-old Rose was developing into a thoughtful, artistic child who filled the house with her sketches and observations. As Sarah stood on the porch of their beautiful home, watching Cole dance with their daughters while Daniel played fiddle and Matthew and Rose chased each other through the crowd, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude for how her life had turned out. Mrs. Henderson, now quite elderly but still sharp as ever, came to stand beside Sarah. "You have built something remarkable here, dear," the older woman said, surveying the happy crowd. "Your mother would be so proud. Your father, too." "I could not have done any of it without Cole," Sarah said honestly. "He saved me, Mrs. Henderson. Not just from Dutch Keller that day in town, but from believing I had to face everything alone." Mrs. Henderson patted her hand. "You saved each other, I think. That is how the best marriages work. You both became better people together than you ever could have been apart." Sarah watched Cole spin Emma and Grace in a complicated dance move that left all three of them laughing. As if sensing her gaze, Cole looked up and caught her eye across the crowd. The smile he gave her was full of such love and joy that it took her breath away, even after 20 years of marriage. "Yes," Sarah said softly. "Yes, I think you are right." The party lasted well into the night, but eventually the guests departed, and the family settled into their evening routine. Sarah and Cole tucked the younger children into bed, then checked on the older ones before finally retiring to their own room. They had added on to the house over the years, giving themselves a spacious master bedroom with large windows that looked out over the land they loved. As they prepared for bed, moving around each other with the comfortable familiarity of long partnership, Cole caught Sarah around the waist and pulled her close. 20 years, he murmured against her hair. "Sometimes it feels like just yesterday I rode into your yard, and sometimes it feels like I have loved you my entire life." Sarah wrapped her arms around his neck, looking up into eyes that still made her heart race. 20 more years, she said firmly. At least. Probably more like 40 or 50. Cole laughed. I will take every single day God grants us. He grew more serious, his hands gentle on her waist. I meant what I said on our wedding night, Sarah. Every word. You are my everything. This life we have built together, these children, this ranch, all of it is more than I ever dreamed of having. You broke Dutch Keller's jaw for me, Sarah said, smiling at the memory that had once been so frightening but now felt almost mythic, a founding moment in their shared history. You said I answered to you. And I have spent every day since proving that what I really meant was that we answered to each other, Cole said. Partners in everything, equals in all things. That was always the promise, Sarah. You have kept that promise, Sarah said, her eyes shining with unshed tears of happiness. Every single day in 1,000 different ways, you have given me a life beyond anything I could have imagined. They made love that night with the tenderness and passion of a couple still deeply in love, still discovering new depths to their connection, even after 20 years. Afterward, lying in Cole's arms in the darkness, listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch settling for the night, Sarah felt a peace so complete it seemed to radiate from her very bones. The years continued their steady march. Daniel married his sweetheart in 1904 and took over the day-to-day running of the horse operation, allowing Cole to step back slightly, though he could never quite retire completely. Emma and Grace both married within a year of each other, though both couples chose to stay in the area, building their own homes on parcels of Brennan land. Matthew showed an interest in veterinary medicine and went off to study in Laramie, while Rose surprised everyone by developing a talent for writing, her articles about ranch life appearing in newspapers across the West. Grandchildren arrived, filling the big house with the sound of young voices once again. Cole proved to be just as devoted a grandfather as he had been a father, always ready to lift a child onto a horse or tell stories about the old days. Sarah delighted in spoiling her grandchildren in ways she had been too busy to spoil her own children, and the entire family gathered at the ranch for holidays and special occasions. In 1912, 30 years after Cole had ridden into Sarah's yard, they sat together on the porch as they had done thousands of times before. Sarah was 52 now, her brown hair streaked with silver. Cole was 55, his dark hair mostly gray, his face deeply lined by sun and time. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the young people who had fallen in love in the summer of 1882. Do you ever regret it? Sarah asked suddenly. Taking a chance on a desperate woman with nothing to offer but a failing ranch and a stubborn refusal to give up? Cole took her hand, lacing their fingers together. Not for one single second. You were never failing, Sarah. You were fighting. There is a difference. And you had everything to offer: strength, courage, determination, intelligence, beauty, kindness. You just needed someone to see it and stand beside you. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. I am the one who had nothing to offer, but you took me in anyway and gave me a purpose, a home, a family. You gave me everything that matters. We gave each other everything, Sarah corrected gently. That is the truth of it, Cole. We each had pieces, and together we made something whole. Cole pulled her close, and they sat together watching the sun set over the land that had brought them together, and that they had built into something remarkable through their combined efforts. Their children and grandchildren were scattered across the property, each living their own lives but still tied to this place and to the legacy Sarah and Cole had created. She answers to me, Cole murmured, repeating the words that had become almost legendary in family lore, the story told and retold to each new generation. That was the best thing I ever said, and the biggest promise I ever made, because it meant I was committing to protect you, defend you, love you, and stand beside you for the rest of my life. And you have, Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. Every single day you have kept that promise. They grew old together on the ranch they had built. surrounded by family and the land they loved. Cole remained active well into his 70s, still overseeing the horse operation and breaking in the occasional young stallion that needed his particular touch. Sarah continued managing the business side, her sharp mind undimmed by age, though she gradually trained her daughters and daughters-in-law to take over more of the responsibilities. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in 1933, a gathering that brought together children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren from across Wyoming and beyond. Sarah was 73, Cole was 76, and both were in remarkable health for their age. The party was a celebration not just of their marriage, but of everything they had built together. A ranch that employed over 20 people, a family that spanned 3 generations, a legacy of fairness and hard work that had become synonymous with the Brennan name. During the party, Daniel, now 49 and looking more like his father every year, stood to make a toast. "To my parents," he said, his voice carrying across the crowd of nearly 100 people, "who taught us all that true love is not about possession or control, but about partnership and respect. Who showed us that the strongest foundation is built on mutual trust and shared dreams, who proved that standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult, is always worth it." He raised his glass. "To 50 more years." Everyone laughed at the optimistic toast, but they all raised their glasses and drank to the couple who had built this remarkable legacy. That night, after all the guests had finally departed and the house was quiet, Sarah and Cole returned to their porch, to the place where they had shared so many evenings over the past 50 years. The land stretched out before them in the moonlight, familiar and beloved. 50 years, Sarah said wonderingly. "When I was 22 and desperate and afraid, I could never have imagined this. Never could have dreamed I would be so blessed." "I was 36 and lost when I rode into your yard," Cole replied. "I thought I was just looking for work and a place to rest for a while. I did not know I was coming home." Sarah leaned against him, and his arms came around her automatically, a gesture repeated so many thousands of times it was as natural as breathing. "Thank you," she whispered, "for breaking Dutch Keller's jaw, for standing up for me when no one else would, for loving me all these years, for being my partner in everything." "Thank you for taking a chance on a drifter," Cole said, "for building this life with me, for giving me a family and a purpose and a reason to be grateful every single day." He kissed the top of her head. "I would do it all again. Sarah, every bit of it. I would ride into your yard 1,000 times and break 1,000 jaws if that is what it took to have this life with you." Sarah tilted her face up to kiss him, their lips meeting with the gentle familiarity of over 50 years of marriage. "I love you, Cole Brennan, today, tomorrow, and forever." "I love you too, Sarah Brennan, with everything I am and everything I have." They sat together under the Wyoming stars, 2 people who had found each other when they both needed it most, who had built something remarkable together through hard work and love, and an unshakable commitment to partnership. Behind them, the house was full of family. Before them, the land stretched out in moonlit beauty, and between them was a love that had endured 5 decades and would endure whatever time they had left. The Wild West was tamed now, turned to ranches and small towns, and the steady march of civilization. But the spirit that had brought a desperate young woman and a wandering cowboy together in the summer of 1882 remained alive in the family they had built, and the legacy they would leave behind. It lived in the story told and retold of the ranch foreman who tried to force her hand, and the cowboy who broke his jaw and said, "She answers to me," and meant it as a promise of partnership rather than possession. It lived in the love that still shone bright in their eyes when they looked at each other, even after 50 years. And it would live on in their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, a reminder that true strength comes not from standing alone, but from finding the right person to stand beside. Cole and Sarah Brennan lived several more years together on the ranch they loved, surrounded by family and the life they had built together. When Cole finally passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82 with Sarah holding his hand, His last words were, "I love you," and his last expression was a smile. Sarah lived another 4 years, long enough to see 2 more great-grandchildren born and to know that the ranch would continue to thrive under Daniel's capable management, and eventually under his sons. When she died at the age of 81, surrounded by family, her last thoughts were of a summer evening in 1882 when a quiet cowboy had ridden into her yard and changed her life forever. She died with a smile on her face and her husband's name on her lips, knowing she would see him again. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a headstone that read simply, "Cole and Sarah Brennan, partners in life, united in love." And the family they had built together, the legacy they had created through hard work and unwavering partnership, continued to flourish for generations to come, a testament to the power of standing together and the enduring strength of true love.